Hazel cat, rescue cat who knows where it's at. Use a chair for her bed, pair of cymbals by her head. Look out, here comes the Hazel cat.
The show took a bit of a chance by not starting off with Spider-Man's origin story, but it paid off. Fans of the comics already knew the story, and we were fine just diving into his exploits. The show was a big hit, and people who didn't read the comics were starting to pay attention, so after a successful first season, it was time to bring the new viewers up to speed. And let me say this, I owned a copy of Amazing Fantasy number 15, which told Spider-Man's origin, and I probably read it a dozen times. Whole chunks of dialogue in this episode are lifted directly from those pages. I'll mention a couple as we go along, but be aware that there are lots of others. That's one thing I really liked about the way this was done. Enough talk. Let's get to it.
Hey, Moose, how's about asking some of the girls to come and have a soda with us?
Okay, Sal, but one of the girls will have to drop out because there's just 2 of us and 3 of them.
Yeah, Moose, but that's the breaks. I wonder which of the 3 girls are the lucky ones.
I'm gonna say the one that gets to stay behind. The girls won't split up. Find a third guy or find something else to do. Peter Parker is walking by, so they ask him to join them. He's way too cool for them, you can tell because he's walking in time with the music. Still, there are worse activities than hanging out with some nice girls, so ask him.
Gee, I'm sorry, fellas, but I have to catch a demonstration of radioactivity over at the lab. My professor's expecting me now.
Can you beat that? A bona fide, true-to-life bookworm.
I have news for you, Moose. In 10 years, you'll probably be working for a bookworm. I'd be nice to them now. It can make life easier for you later. In the original comic, Peter's nemesis was Flash Thompson, the captain of the football team. He and his girlfriend Liz Allen would harass Peter constantly, pushing him around, making fun of him. Flash liked to call him Puny Parker. After high school, Flash went into the military and saw combat in Vietnam. Needless to say, he came out a very different person, and by the time he vanished from the stories, he and Peter had reconciled. We won't see him or Liz in this series, probably because of time constraints. I have to say, it's not a big loss. In the comics, they were more irritating than anything else. And I wonder if bona fide is supposed to foreshadow people calling him Spidey. Probably not. Most of us know the story. We're demonstrating how we control and direct radiation, and unbeknownst to anyone, a spider is dropping down on its web right into the radiation beam. Radiation looks very different today. In the 60s, it bore an amazing resemblance to electricity. Lots of lay people made that mistake, and only the scientists knew the difference.
Ouch, something bit me. It was just a spider. Why do I feel so strange, so different? I better go get some fresh air.
And if it's a brown recluse or something similar, you want to get to a doctor right now. There's no such thing as just a spider. Some are our friends, others not so much. I've watched people get a spider bite and lose whole chunks of their leg to gangrene. Other spiders are our good friends. If you ever get the chance to visit this studio, first of all, brace yourself, I'm a slob, but second, you may see several spiders. I encourage their presence because I despise mosquitoes and other tiny annoying insects. My pals here eat those annoyances, so they're welcome here. We never learn what kind of spider that was, but if it's capable of biting a human, there's a good chance it's one of the venomous kind. Still, I don't think the family doctor is going to know how to adequately treat this bite.
I can't shake this feeling. As though my entire body is charged with some sort of fantastic energy.
He still doesn't know what happened, and we have a small issue here. Peter did indeed ride a small motorcycle like that, 2 or 3 years into the comic series. At this time, he walked everywhere or took the bus. He saved for a long time to buy his bike and was very proud of it when he was finally able to afford it. The $10 word for what we have here is anachronism. The $2 word for it is oops.
Can just one spider bite do that? I wonder if the radioactivity in the lab might have had something to do. No, that's just too far-fetched.
I don't know. It's not much more far-fetched than Peter wandering off and forgetting his bike down by the waterfront.
Hey, look out, Mac. This'll teach you to watch where you're walking, you four-eyed fowler.
I hardly felt it.
Peter can't figure out how he did any of that, but the other two guys aren't about to hang around and see what else he can do, just in case he decides to do it to them. It's possible Peter didn't even notice. He's moseying along, pondering all this and not watching where he's going.
That car, it doesn't see me. I have to leap aside fast. What's come over me? Am I going mad?
That's straight out of the comic. The line, "Am I going mad?" always stuck with me because I bought my Amazing Fantasy number 15 around 1967 or thereabouts, and kids Peter's age didn't talk like that anymore. I was still in my teens, so I didn't understand a lot of the things I do now. The word mad as a euphemism for insane had been around for a long time, but our understanding of mental illness was making great leaps forward. We were coming to understand that this wasn't some monolithic thing that we could just subsume under a convenient term like madness. There were many types of mental illness, and they all presented their own ways and needed to be treated in their own ways. Words like madman suddenly carried connotations that weren't conducive to productive discussion, and people slowly stopped using them. But it was a process, and in 1962, when Spider-Man premiered, the process was still ongoing. Even though words like mad were becoming throwbacks, it's not a stretch to see a studious kid like Peter speaking in a more refined, sometimes a little archaic fashion. But again, in 1967, I didn't know that, so it struck me as odd and stayed with me. Peter is experimenting with his new ability, or delusion, he's not sure which.
I'm like some sort of giant insect, like a wall-crawling human spider.
For shame, Peter. You know spiders are arachnids, not insects. I'm constantly amazed how many people in these cartoons make that error. Did the writers not know that? Writing the first issue was sort of a clusterfull with Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, and Jack Kirby all claiming they came up with the idea first. I know Stan Lee sometimes took credit for other people's work, but Steve Ditko and Jack Kirby both left Marvel under questionable circumstances, and they both made those claims many years later, so I'm not sure we don't have some sour grapes to deal with on top of everything else. Whoever wrote it, they seem to have consistently gotten that little tidbit wrong. Maybe they did it just so I could point it out 60 years later. Stan Lee did like to play the long game. He's been watching news footage of the Hulk and decided that's the way to travel. Unfortunately, his body didn't have the huge musculature that the Hulk's does. He realized he needed to invent his webbing when his knees and ankles were so shot by the end of the day he had to crawl home. Yes, I know the Hulk came after Spider-Man. Don't spoil my joke.
In the frantic days that follow, the ingenious youth creates his web shooter.
It works like a charm. 2 presses of this simple doohickey, and zowie.
As the comic series went along, it seemed like there was always somebody on the letters page asking why Peter's web shooter doesn't fire every time he makes a fist. It was answered in the origin story. He presses the web trigger twice to fire. Assuming his hands aren't as twitchy as mine, that means he can make a fist and not set it off. Simple. Plus, right now, he's not thinking about making fists and hitting people. He's thinking he can be the biggest new TV act on the planet. Let's notice one other thing.
With my newfound spider power, I can control it like a sharpshooter, and I'll keep modifying the fluid till it's just the right consistency.
Another question people frequently asked in the letters page was, why doesn't he run out of web fluid? If you look closely, you saw that he has little cartridges going all around his wrist. Each one is a supply of fluid, and when one empties, the device switches to another. I enjoyed the Tobey Maguire movie, but how his webs came about was the biggest disappointment for me. Glands developing in his wrists? Isn't that convenient considering spiders have their web glands in their butts? Can you picture what that movie would be like? Now I want to see a remake. He creates his costume, gets the hang of swinging on his webs, and he's off to fame and fortune. I regret to say there is a lot of padding in this episode. We'll spend a good 2 minutes just watching him swing around the city before he finally sails through a window into a TV station building.
Stop! Thief! Stop, thief! You in the costume, grab him! If he makes it to the elevator, he'll get away! What's with you, mister? All you had to do was trip him or hold him just for a minute.
That's your problem, not mine. Sorry, pal, I'm through being pushed around. From now on, I look out for number 1, and that means me.
That's also straight out of the comic, though Steve Ditko's rendition of the bad guy was very different from this one. That's a stylistic thing, and it's no exaggeration to say Ditko's style was unique. Nobody's been able to duplicate it. For a while, I got the impression that Jim Steranko was trying to, but he went on to develop his own unique style, and I was glad to see that, even though I found his style more than a little weird.
Your audition was just great, son. Now, if you can do the same thing in front of the lights and cameras, you'll have it made.
Sir, I'll be the best.
Sir, pardon me for interrupting your reverie, but your wiener's on fire. Peter can't wait to tell Uncle Ben and Aunt May about this. With the money he'll make, their worries are over. Sadly, we already know different.
What happened?
Brace yourself, son. I have bad news. Your Uncle Ben has been shot. Murdered.
Uncle Ben? Dead? No, it can't be.
It was a burglar who your uncle surprised. But we'll get him. He's trapped in the old Acme warehouse at the Waterfront.
That settles that. Peter flies into a rage, puts his costume back on, and heads for vengeance. But first we need more padding. Spiderman does whatever a spider can. At least we get to listen to the theme song during this padding session. That makes it a little more interesting. The Acme warehouse is way off on the other side of town, so it'll take him the whole song to get there.
There's no place on earth you can run to escape me. This is for the man you killed.
Spider-Man did that to bad guys a lot, and there's never any mention of broken bones, concussions, internal organ damage, or any of that stuff. New York criminals are impossibly tough. That's why the police need help from superheroes.
That face, Oh, no, it can't be. But it is. The fugitive who ran past me the other day. The one I didn't stop when I had the chance. If I only had tackled him when I had the chance. But I didn't, so he escaped, and now Uncle Ben is dead.
We all have our if-onlys. If only 2 people I trusted hadn't betrayed me behind my back, I might have been a Bible teacher in Brazil. If only my wife and I had stayed in Denver instead of moving to Wyoming, I might have gotten my PhD and gone on to be a great scholar. If only I hadn't been such a nerd in high school, I might have had an easier time and not turned to drugs. There are people who spend their lives pondering if only. And take it from me, it's a waste of your precious time. Look backward to learn, not to mourn. What's happening right now is the part that counts, and if you miss it, you can't get it back. The best thing to do with an if only is make the necessary adjustments that it's trying to teach you and apply what you learned to the present. Then take what you have and run with it. Why do you think I do this? I love to make people laugh and I love to teach. I've never really gotten the chance to do either one professionally, but with this forum I can do both. And I'll tell you what, I'm having the time of my life. I never envisioned doing any of my stuff this way, but when the chance came along, I said, just go with it. Peter is taking a similar approach, though with a very different mood and intention.
Yes, Uncle Ben is dead, and in a sense it's really I who killed him. Because I didn't realize in time that with great power there must also always be great responsibility. But I know it now. And so long as I live, Spider-Man will never shirk his duty again.
That's the dock where he left his bike. Looks like somebody helped themselves to it. Good thing he didn't notice.
Robbers, killers, beware. Spider-Man is here.
Stan Lee's bosses didn't like the idea of Spider-Man and tried to squelch it, but Lee knew he had something. Issue 15 was supposed to be the final issue of Amazing Fantasy, which is funny because that was the only issue that appeared under that name. Up to then, it had been called Amazing Adult Fantasy. They changed the name for this issue and nobody cared because the series was being canceled anyway. Lee said, look, it's the last issue, so there's nothing to lose. Let's put it there. They agreed, and suddenly Amazing Fantasy number 15 sold like no other comic they had ever made, and the powers that be gave the most brilliant response they could come up with. Huh? Spider-Man immediately got his own comic, and the rest, as they say, is history. There were a couple of attempts to revive Amazing Fantasy in the 90s and beyond, but best I can tell, nothing ever came of it. As for the 1962 audiences, this guy was cool. He had issues, and his motivation for being a hero made sense. He was also picked on at school, had few if any friends, and was often fairly depressed. The trade magazines hailed this new generation. They were excited to see something totally new, superheroes with issues. Not superhero issues, real people issues. The Fantastic Four had a little bit of that, but Spider-Man really set the bar. By the time the Hulk and Daredevil came along, the principle was well established. These are people just like us with stuff just like ours that their powers can't deal with. As one magazine put it, they're new and they're groovy. They're superheroes with problems. Marvel was on the move. The Fantastic Four provided action and excitement. Spider-Man added a human element, and the Marvel Age of Comics was born. The United States was never the same afterward. That's probably a good thing. Spider-Man's or his what? We won't be... Yeah, we won't do that either. In the lettered... The necessary This guy is cool. He had This guy was cool. Good grief.